Hello, Frizzle faction. I am a reader girly, but I'm also a STEM girly, and this is my chance to let loose. Because I am obsessed with spreadsheets and tracking things and doing fun experiments and seeing all the numbers and the math. I love it. So we are going to be getting into the stats of the books I read in 2023, if I met my reading goals in 2023, and making goals for 2024. And the first is, I read 165 books in 2023. Here is all of those by star rating. I definitely met my reading goal because my reading goal was one book. And my goal for 2024 is also one book. I like it as a statement of it doesn't matter how much you read. Something that I loved making this year was a Gantt chart of my reading, which is like a timeline. So let's start scrolling through that now. This is every single line is a book I read, and going from left to right is going through the entire calendar year. They are color-coded by what I rated them, with green being the 5 stars and the best. And I feel really good about my reading this year. I found a lot of really awesome books. I also found some books that I didn't quite like, but I was in love with reading for a majority of this year. And those are all 165. That totals to 50,869 pages, counting all the pages that I read, including the ones I listened to via audiobook and the ones that are inside books that I did not finish. If we break the books down by pages, here's the distribution there. As you can see, I read one book that was really long, outlier, and the rest are a pretty good bell curve, including all of these short ones down at the bottom, which are both novellas, and books that I didn't finish, that I only read a little chunk of those pages. The longest books I read, along with their star rating, are Midnight Sun at 671 pages, Olympian Affair 656 pages, Sea Sparrow 624 pages, The Bone Shard War 616 pages, Born Identity 608 pages, Jade City an even 600, and Renegades, the only 5-star in this bunch, 563. Most of these books I look at and I say, yeah, you were too long. Renegades, Jade City, and Sea Sparrow are the 3 books here that I say, yeah, they deserve their length. The rest of them bloated, could have been edited down, should have been shorter. But I did read all of them. The shortest books I read are these bundle of novellas. The Lord Sorcier, 44 pages, Centaur and Sensibility, 56 pages, The Flowers of Vashnoi, 98 pages, Warrior Born, 100 pages, Masquerade in Lodi, 102 pages, Cocktails and Chloroform, 115, and Killjoy, 130 pages. Breaking down those pages and books by the month, we get these graphs. My highest reading month was August, and my lowest reading month was March. One of the things I've been keeping track of this year is how fast I read each book. What's my pages per day rate for each of these? And that has led to this wild graph that I have an entire video for my patrons just breaking down and exploring and trying to figure out what is causing this. Basically what this graph is saying with its, count them, 2 ridiculous peaks, is that if I'm liking a book, I either read it at around 40 pages a day or at around 90 pages a day. And yeah, this graph, it's preposterous and it's mine, and I love it and I hate it, and I have a lot of feelings about it. The book that I read the fastest this year was The Toll, which was actually a DNF. My rate of those pages before I gave up was the fastest I read all year. I gave it 2 stars. The second fastest book I read all year was actually my favorite book of the year, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Then Things You Save in a Fire, Supernova, Half a Soul, System Collapse, Assassins of Thassalon, and Tress of the Emerald Sea are the other fast ones in the ranking. The book that I read the slowest the entire year was a 1-star, Mysterious Ways, followed by Salmouth, a 4-star that I actually loved but read very slowly anyway, followed by Belladonna the Ferryman, City of Bones, Beastly Bones. Now let's explore how I found my books. Here is that breakdown. 7% of the books this year were rereads, 36% were continuing on in a series, 19% of the books were hyped, I picked up because I heard awesome reviews of it, 19% was a repeat author where I had loved the author before, was reading them again, 10% of the book was just me browsing, 4% of the books were a personalized recommendation given to me by one of my friends or one of my lovely commenters, and 5% of my reading was from a project list. So now let's look at the important bit, which is, what did I rate all these categories? What were the most successful ways to find good books? Obviously, rereads takes the cake with an average rating of 4.6. Next is continuing on in a series with a 3.6, followed by hyped books, which is a 3.3. Now, this is a big deal because hyped books was a category that was really low last year. Last year, it was a 2.9. And I made the goal to not pay attention to the hype, to not pick up books because they were hyped because it was going so poorly for me. And then this year, I actually picked up more books because of the hype, so did not follow that goal. It went up from 12% of my reading to 19% of my reading. However, despite not completing the goal to not pick up hype books, I was also picking up better hyped books, and the average rating went up. And I think that was because the part of the goal that I did internalize and put into my brain is don't pick up books just because everyone's reading them. Those kind of hype books. Like you see, I did not pick up Fourth Wing this year because I did not hear a single review of it that made me think that I might like it. The hyped books that I was picking up was not because a large number of people were reading them, but because I heard a specific review and I said to myself, that's the kind of book that I want to read. That's the kind of book that I like. So it was much more targeted picking up books because of the hype, and because of that, I had very good success with it, so I think I will continue to do that. Next is repeat author with a 3.1 average rating, browsing, also a 3.1, personalized recommendations with 2.7. This is the big failure because one of my goals was to pick up more personalized book recommendations because it was one of the highest rated categories of last year. Last year, personalized recommendations got an average of 3.6. This year, it's a 2.7. Did I complete my goal of picking up more personalized recommendations? I did, but it didn't go well. I think I'm going to keep the goal of prioritizing personalized book recommendations because I really enjoy receiving personalized book recommendations and I want to continue and hope that they'll get better. So you need to recommend me books that you think I will love because I need more of those. And lastly, we have the project list with a 2.5. This is always the lowest. It's books that I'm picking up because they're on the list, and I'm doing that for fun and for experiments and for content, but not necessarily because I think they're going to be 5-star books. I always hope though. Looking at how I find books, I'm thinking a lot about my want to read list on Goodreads. These are the books that are on my TBR that I want to pick up. Some of them are ones that I own and some of them are just on my radar. And right now that's at like 132. And this has gone down at the beginning of 2023. This was at 162. And I want it to go down even more. I only want to be putting books on this list that I really want to read and keeping that a priority so I can keep high enthusiasm for all the books on the list. So I think I'm going to goal to, by the end of 2024, I want this number to be under 100, and I want to keep it under 100. Only adding things to this list that I really want to read and I really intend to read and that are priorities for me. Next, let's look at how I got my books. This is the first time I've tracked this. Here's our pie chart. 67% of the books are ones that I borrowed, typically from the library, a mix of audiobooks and ebooks, and a few physical books. 17% of my reading was bought books. Between physically reading a book and an ebook, I prefer ebooks. So all of these bought books are ebooks, and I'm only buying a book if I can't get it from the library or some other way, which usually means that they're self-published, which usually means that the ebooks are super cheap. So my average purchase of these bought books is probably around $3, and I'm feeling very happy with that budget amount. And 17% of my reading was given to me, typically by a publisher or by an author. Getting free books is awesome. As someone who does not enjoy buying things, I am very happy that my bought slice of the pie is so small. And this ties into one of my goals. Most of this given slice is ARCs or advanced reader copies, and one of my goals for 2023 was to request less ARCs because I was going a little too much in 2022 for that. In 2022, I read 43 ARCs. The average star rating was pretty low at 2.9, and in 2023 I accomplished my goal to do less of that because I only read 27, and the average rating was a 3.5. So I was only actually picking the ones up that I was excited to pick up. Next, let's look at when these books were published. Here's my histogram spread here. As you can see, we've got a big spike here for 2023 books. There are 40 of them. I enjoy reading new releases. It's fun being part of the conversation as a book comes out. And then we've got a nice exponential drop off here as they go down. In history, there are 4 old books that didn't fit on this chart. We've got the oldest book I read in 2023 being Frankenstein from 1818, and then there were none from 1939, Lord of Light from 1967, and Kindred from 1979. And we can also see this fun chart. The y-axis here is when I read them in the year. So we've got on the left is the January books, all the way to the right was the December books. And then we've got on the y-axis the year that they were published. So you can see, like, I read 2 2024 releases early this year, and you can see these fun diagonal lines through here that are me reading through a series, and a whole lot of books that were published in 2023. Now let's take a dive into the vibes of the books that I read First, let's look at Booktone. This is a reader personality test that I designed. You can take the test. I'll link it down in the footnotes for you. Basically, the pale colors are intellectual books. The darker saturated colors are emotional books. If it's yellow, it's an atmosphere, world-building, vibes-focused books. If it's blue, it's a character-focused book. If it's red, it's a plot-focused book, and all the mixing colors in the middle. So here is the breakdown of my reading in 2023. As you can see, I end up reading from all the book tones, but I'm really trying to avoid yellow because that's by far my least favorite, and I'm kind of succeeding. But it's hard to know what a book is before I pick it up. One of my goals this year was to seek out character-focused books, and I did accomplish that. Here's looking at the book tone where the blue is all the character-focused types, and the orange is the non-character-focused types. Here's for 2022. As you can see, it improved in 2023. I read more % character-focused because I was trying to seek that out. And the reason that I care so much about reading character-focused is because those are my favorite types. I really love it. You can see that with my average star rating for all of these types. Colors without character focus, the yellows, the reds, the oranges are lower, just because it's really hard for me to love a book if it doesn't have any character focus. And here is just my 5-star reads of the year. You see we've got some gray, which is in the middle there, and the other character-focused colors of green, blue, and purple. Plenty of those, and I tend to like intellectual books more than emotional books, but I can love an emotional book. I used to report the book tone of every book in my wrap-up, and I kind of stopped doing that because I had this idea in my head that maybe my audience wasn't appreciating it, it was just taking up time, but I think I'm gonna bring it back because I appreciate it and like, get on board or leave. Now let's look at the genre breakdown. I read so much fantasy that I split it into 3 categories here. We've got 21% is high fantasy, 17% is urban fantasy, and we've got 14% with romantasy. I also read a whole lot of sci-fi. That's in 2 categories here. We've got 22% sci-fi and 9% sci-romance. And then we've got a bunch of little slices of the pie with 2% nonfiction, 10% mystery/thriller books, 4% contemporary romance novels, and we've got a little sliver there at the end that is literary fiction. Now let's see which of these genres I liked the best. Here's all the star ratings across the board. We've got going from top to bottom: sci-romance, romantasy, urban fantasy, sci-fi, romance, high fantasy, mystery, thriller, literary fiction, and nonfiction. So our highest is in sci-romance! And I am going to be chasing more sci-romance books this year because I love it as a genre, and I've got a video project coming up this month exploring all of that. I'm super excited about it. And the lowest rated this year was nonfiction, but I also didn't read that many nonfiction. So actually, one of my goals is also going to be to pursue more nonfiction. I want to read at least 10 nonfiction books in the next year because I want to be learning, and more than that, I want to find the nonfiction books that I can love. Because obviously I didn't find them this year, but I know that they're out there and I want to find them. Next, we've got the pacing of my reading as determined by Storygraph. It's a very small sliver of slow, and then after that, about half and half medium fast. I looked at the slow books here, and a lot of them are like my least favorite books of the year, but some of them are my most favorite books of the year, so it's just kind of divisive for me. If you can get a really good intellectual character-focused slow book, I can love it. Otherwise, boring, hate it, no way. And can we talk about the Storygraph obsession with pie charts? I mean, there should obviously be a bar chart, right? Because there's an order that they can go in. So in order to present the data best, they should go in that order. Am I the only one that's bothered by how many people use pie charts for things that pie charts shouldn't be used for? No? Just me? Okay. Moving on for a actually good pie chart of something that a pie chart should be used for, we've got all the moods of my reading. Very much adventurous. I love an adventurous book. After that, mysterious and dark. I don't love dark books, but I do end up picking a lot of them up, and I did enjoy some mystery thrillers this year. And then I also read a lot of emotional books. It's fun. Now let's look at the authors I read this year. My most read author this year? Lois McMaster-Bujold, which makes a lot of sense because one of my goals this year was to read all of her books. I didn't accomplish it, but look how hard I tried. We read a whole lot of Lois McMaster-Bujold this year, and I loved most of them. Highly recommend, like, all of her books. They're fantastic. After that, we've got Martha Wells. I reread a lot of the Murderbot Diaries series, and I also read a few of her other books. Stephen Press is the author of my worst book of the year, but also some other books in that same series that I loved. Lindsay Buroker, I've been tearing through one of her series here in December, and I'm excited to explore her bibliography more in the coming year. She's got a lot of short books, so it's easy to go right through them and rack them up fast. But this graph is only telling us who my most read authors was, but it got me thinking about, like, who is my favorite author? So of course I turned to numbers to figure it out. So I decided we would score every single author based on what I had rated their books. So I made a formula to score every author, and if your score came out to 1 or higher, you became a favorite author. So here are those. Highest score with a 6.9 was Jim Butcher. Yes, I've read all of his books, and I've absolutely been obsessed with most of them. Then we've got Lois McMaster-Bujold with a 5.9, coming in close second. Rachel Aaron with a 2.6, definitely also deserves to be on this list. I've given her quite a few 5 stars. Then Brandon Sanderson, who also belongs on this list. I haven't loved a lot of his new releases, but I have loved many of his books in the past, and yes, he deserves his spot here. Favorite author status. I'll pick up anything he writes. Then Martha Wells with a 2.1 for the Murderbot Diaries series. K.A. Applegate for the Animorphs series. Maggie Stiefvater for quite a few of her books. Patricia Briggs for the Mercy Thompson and Alpha and Omega series that I love so much. And Emma Bull, who I consider to be my favorite author of all time. But she's only written like 5 novels, so it's hard for her to rack up the points of some of the other authors on this list, but she deserves a spot. And looking through these, no one was added to the list in 2023. These are all people who would have been on this list in 2022 already, but I'm hoping to add new authors to this list in 2024. Now let's look at the series I'm in the middle of. I'm tracking it through this Notion board. So we've got a few different groups here. We've got the in progress series where I'm actively reading them and I'm not yet caught up. We've got the waiting for the next release category where I'm caught up with the series and I'm just waiting for the next book. And for those that have release dates, the dates are on these cards. Then once I've either finished a series or decided I'm not going to continue in a series, I take them off the active series tracker list. But in progress series, we've got Letters of Enchantment, which is the Divine Rivals series. I need to read book 2. Gotta get my hands on that ASAP. The DFZ Changeling series, a series by Rachel Aaron. Excited to continue on that one. We've got Jereg, which I've got some mixed feelings about because one of the books in there was my least favorite book of the year. But I still have hope that the series will continue, and I'm going to continue on with it. The Morrigan Crow series, and I think I'm waiting to continue on with that until the next book is a little closer to publication date. Star Nomad Fallen Empire series, the one I've been binging this month from Lindsay Baroker. Border Town, a series that I started when I was a teenager and recently realized that there was one book left in the series that I haven't read yet, so I've got that checked out from the library and I'm going to start it soon. The Hollows, which is a series I just started and I loved book 1, and also We Are Bob, a series that I just started and loved book 1. For the waiting for the next release list, we've got Pembroke and Desdemona, the Sand Sea Trilogy, Mercy Thompson, Rivers of London, Stormlight Archive, Miss Percy's Guide, Tethered Spirits, The Sixth World, The Hexologist, Murderbot Diaries, Cinderspires, Stephen Oakwood, Kate Daniels, the Williamton series spinoff, Emily Wilde, and Dresden Files. So whenever those books have a new release, I am going to be there and I'm going to be reading it. So right now that makes 8 in progress series and 15 waiting for the next release series, and I like those numbers. I would like to keep my active in progress series to be 10 or lower. I don't want to be opening series that I don't end up shutting and concluding. Last year I had a project where I was purposely reading series out of order. And I was trying to prove the hypothesis that it didn't affect my enjoyment if I skipped book 1 or if I read book 1 in a series. And I worked really hard on that project in 2022, but I didn't quite get enough data to make a conclusion on the hypothesis either way. So in 2023, I continued to skip books and I have reached a conclusion. So here's some star rating distributions. The blue is when I'm reading series out of order and the red is when I'm reading them in order, reading the first books. And as you can see, the distributions, they're like the same. The average rating for the skipped out of order books is a 3.06 and the not skipped first books is a 3.05. I'm calling that. That's close enough. That's the same. And I have proven my hypothesis that if I skip a book 1 in the series, I can still love the series just as much as if I read book 1 and sometimes even more. I mean, on average, probably sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, but I really enjoy sometimes skipping book 1 and I'm going to continue doing that in the future. I love this data. Further proving that everyone who reads series in order is a coward. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the most important stats, my star ratings for the year. Let's take a deep dive into it. Here is the distribution for my 2023 reading. I love how this is like a bell curve with a little bit more on the positive side than on the 1-2 star negative side here on the left. This is exactly what I want my reading to look like. That I'm being like a harsh critic. I'm not afraid to give a 1 star or a 2 star, but also I'm giving out a good share of 5 stars. But not like so many that my 5 stars don't mean anything anymore, you know? And a lot of this 5-star chunk is rereads. If I take those out, it's a lot lower. One of my goals for 2023 was to DNF more, so let's look how I did. In 2023, 19.6% of my reading was a DNF. I'm so excited about that number. I was giving up on books left and right. But the reason that I care about this isn't just I'm a hater and I want to give up on more books. No, it's because if I'm hating a book, I don't want to waste my time finishing it. So the real thing is that I want to decrease the amount of books that I'm hating but still finishing. So I also achieved that. Let's look at this. The yellow slice here is the books that I hated but still finished, which is 4.2% of my reading. In 2022, that was 11.3% of my reading. So I totally decreased that number and I'm so happy with that. And in 2024, I want to decrease it even more. If I'm hitting a book, I do not want to be finishing that book. Now, the biggest goal, the purpose of all of these stats and this reading and all of these experiments is to try to enjoy books more, is to try to find more books that I love, is to try to increase my overall star rating. So one of my goals was to get higher than what I did in 2022, which was a 3.36. You know what the average star rating was for 2023 reading? A 3.35. So I did not increase my star rating. So I think my goal for 2024 is to beat a 3.35. I want to be increasing my average star rating by finding even more awesome books. One of my other goals for this year is going to be letting my patrons in on more behind the scenes content of what I've got upcoming plans with and projects. So if you want to be updated on what is brewing in the Frizzle verse, sign up to be one of my patrons, which I'm doing through Ko-fi. And if you liked watching this video, I highly recommend my other stats videos, like this one.